Reading recommendations.
Hey there. It's time for a reading recommendation. We all know that what we experience in life changes and directs who we are to some degree. And we have often observed how a big dramatic experience or one of amazing significance can lead to a complete transformation, a total change of the way of viewing the world, or a radical transformation of behaviour. But can this be brought about deliberately? Is it possible to plan a series of experiences or one big experience which will lead to an improvement in someone? Could a secret ritual or ceremony hold the secrets to upgrading human consciousness? That's the subject of the book I would like to recommend to you. It's called The Art and Science of Initiation. Now, it's edited by Jedediah French and Angel Millar, but each chapter is written by a different authority. And if you do a look through who the authors are, it really is a who's who of esoteric writers and philosophical experts in this subject. The book is published by Lewis Masonic, which is a wonderfully well managed company. It's a paperback and has a beautiful cover which has been painted by one of the editors, Angel Millar. For me, it's an inspirational work of art that I really like to have on my shelf. There are lilies and pomegranates which are around the two pillars of King Solomon's temple, and you can see the all-seeing eye and the letter G and the winding staircase leading to the entrance. It makes me think of human success on all levels. Now, I mentioned that each chapter is written by a different inspiring author. And this means that they stand alone. So you can read this book in any order and just choose those chapters which are the most interesting to you. I would, however, recommend that you do read them all, because looking at the whole gamut of opinions means that you get to see everything and get to consider options you might not have before, rather than going to an echo chamber of your own opinions and of the things that you find most enjoyable. However, in this review, I am actually going to focus on just pointing out a few of these chapters which I believe are worth reading first and were of the most interest to me. So first and foremost, the majority of the focus in this work is on the mechanism behind initiation. How does it work? How can an experience, a planned ritual experience, bring a transformation to the person? And that's actually what I find the most interesting as well. So you'll find that in this video, I'm going to be focusing in on that almost exactly. For this reason, I would recommend the first chapter you read is the one on initiations past and present, which talks about how in every culture there tends to be certain rites which are about change. They're to allow you to take on a new role or to grow into something. It's a coming of age, and how these tend to have different components that help that. So often they have an inspirational component, just like if you watched a good film or read a good novel, there'd be something that touch your heart and inspire you to change. Secondly, there tends to be a instructional element, which teaches you what you're meant to do so you can consciously remember and apply that. And in addition to this, there'll be some form of endowment. They'll give you something that says this is your new role, you're an elder, you're a priest, you're taking on this new role, here's your vestments, here's the medal, here's the hat, here's something that says now it's time to do this. Then in your journey through the book, you might want to look at some of the other mechanisms. So there's a wonderful chapter which explores the ancient Greek mysteries, and it really does manage to get a picture of what they did in one particular mystery and where they did it and what routines and what grades there were and how they thought it worked. I won't go into too much detail here, but for me it was really interesting to take that journey back in time to see the expectations of the ancients, whereby you join a group and be given a ring to mark your membership and told that from now on you are immune to drowning. This particular mystery group, that when they joined that cult, they were then immune to drowning from then on. What a gift and what a promise. Now, one subject you'll see touched on in this chapter is the idea of contact with higher forces. And there's actually a whole chapter just on this. And it's wonderful. It really is an inspirational chapter written by a very experienced person. Is it possible to consciously create, or is there a ceremony that can invite a higher power, a god or an angel, to meet with someone? And we see most religions do tend to take their authority from this kind of encounter. Could you make it happen? And other ceremonies that do the opposite. Could you call something from perhaps a very different place, somewhere not so conducive for humans? Well, this chapter covers all of this. And it does this both from a traditional point of view, and it mentions the authorities in modern orders or recent orders, and how sometimes beings are most certainly guiding a tradition. What I really loved was how it covers the manuals for this. Things like the Arbitel and how the Olympic planetary spirits can be communed with. It has the most succinct, inspirational and brilliant explanation of the process of the Ablamelon working, whereby you summon the angels and meet them and have contact with your holy guardian angel, and how you bind the different demons. It really is worth reading if you find these areas interesting. If that's something which you'd like to explore more, you probably will also find the chapter Initiations, Light and Dark, which goes into the opposite. Could a ceremony take you somewhere? Couldn't you go and visit the underworld and go on an adventure, or go to a higher plane and come back with a transformation? Could it be that an experience of one of these places would be more powerful than anything on earth? Well, this chapter explores the ceremonies, the mechanisms, and the traditional places both in ancient pagan traditions, such as doorways to the underworld, or in modern Christian traditions, or should I say more modern Christian traditions, whereby there are special places where you can get closer to these higher planes. You can also, if you take time to really explore this chapter, start to get a feel for how things may have changed. So, if you look at the accounts of dreams of the past, they seem to be very different to the dreams we have now. The material world's very different. Could it be that the place we go to after life has changed too? I think that's a very interesting idea to contemplate. Now, if you would like to move to something more philosophical with a focus on original thoughts, there's a chapter which explores a Neoplatonic method of emulation, which I thought was wonderful. So, is it possible through a ritual to connect your mind with a hero, a archetype, a original figure of exactly what you're going to cultivate in yourself? You see, many of these traditions have a central figure, whether it's a Christian Rosenkreutz or whether it's Hercules or Hiram. Well, this chapter chooses Hiram as a lens to focus on this possible mechanism. Could you, through contemplation, through ritual, through tuning in, connect with this pure being, this pure idea of a way of being, and take on these powerful new qualities? I think this is an inspiration to explore. And now, talking about contemplation in ritual, there's actually a whole chapter which is on ritual as a means of training awareness. Now, I mentioned that this is very much a Western tradition-focused book, but it does reference Oriental methods in order to help compare and explore. But this chapter is written by a practitioner of Western ritual, and it shows how you can gain awareness, mindfulness as we'd call it modernly, through training. And ritual is a very good form of training for awareness. You can't miss a prompt or drift off or you'll forget what you've got to say next. And you can see this used in the East and the West for this very method. And this template of excellence, when you experience that level of awareness, it can have ripples in the rest of your life. Just like if you learn to contemplate in a ceremony, that can go back into how you function every single day. So for me, this was really interesting to explore ritual as a training method whereby you see the example of the excellence you seek to imitate. Now I'm going to move slightly away from the mechanism focus into just a few other chapters which for me were just really fun to read and really interesting. There's a chapter on the OTO and how under Crowley the Golden Dawn system evolved and what other influences he brought in, and it just focuses on how it happened and what they did and what was changed and why. And that's great because there are so many distractions in anything to do with Crowley. It's like a miasma of interest in other things. Well, for me, who wants to know what and how, this is great. It really is beautiful to see the comparison between other orders. Really worth reading. There's a chapter which explores counter-initiation. Could you get this wrong? Or could you have the wrong idea of what's right? Is it possible to have a ritual which disempowers, confuses, misdirects someone? Really important to look at that. Really important to go into that. And finally, you may like to have a look at the Swedish Rite, an order for men and women, inspired by Swedenborg's mystical writings. There's a lot deep in there, but there's also some fun, light-hearted things about the development of this order and how that unfolds. These are the chapters which I would like to point out to your attention, but you can be sure to find something which may uplift you in here, whether it be how meeting a person can change you, whether it be the story of how certain orders evolve and are directed, or something which for me remains hidden, which you can mention in the comment section below. But most of all, I believe that if you read this book, take time to contemplate its contents and let that fully sink in, you may be left with the conclusion that this title itself is an initiation for you.